Hi, sweetie. How are you feeling? Okay, good. Are you tired already? You would like to hear a bedtime story? I'm going to read you one. Is there anything in particular that you would like to hear? Just a bedtime story? Okay. Well, I have a very nice book over here that I want to read you the story of. And it's called The Treasure of Fairy Tales. Would you like that? Yes? Okay. Let me see which story I can read to you today. Okay. I'm going to read to you Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little village girl, the prettiest you've ever seen. Her mother loved her dearly, as did her grandmother. She had made a little red hood which suited her so well that everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Your grandmother is not very well. Go and see how she is, and you can take her some cookies and this homemade jar of jelly." Little Red Riding Hood left right away to visit her grandmother, who lived in another village. As she was walking through the forest, she met a wolf. He would have liked to gobble her up on the spot, but he did not dare to because there was some woodcutters nearby in the forest. He pretended to be very kind and asked her where she was going. The poor girl did not know that it was dangerous to talk to a wolf, and she said to him, "I'm going to see my grandmother, to take her some cookies and a jar of jelly my mother made for her." "Does she live very far away?" asked the wolf. "Oh yes," replied the Little Red Riding Hood. "Her house is beyond the mill, by the first house in the village." "Well," said the wolf, "I would like to see her too. I will take this road here, and you take the other road, and we will see who arrives first." The wolf set off the shortest path, running as fast as he could, while the little girl went by the other long path, amusing herself by gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and picking small bunches of flowers. It did not take the wolf very long to reach the grandmother's house. He reached up and knocked on the door. Tap, tap. "Who is it?" came a voice from inside. "It's your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf, disguising his voice. "I have brought you some cookies and a jar of jelly my mother has made for you." The good grandmother, who was in bed, called out, "Lift up the latch and come in." The wolf lifted the latch and the door opened. At once he leaped onto the bed and ate up the poor woman in less than a second. Then he closed the door and lay down in grandmother's bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. A few moments later, she knocked at the door. Tap, tap. "Who is it?" came the gruff wolf's voice. When she heard this, Little Red Riding Hood was a little scared at first, but remembering her grandmother was ill, she answered, "It's your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some cookies and a jar of jelly my mother has made for you." The wolf softened his voice. a little and called out, "Lift up the latch and come in." Little Red Riding Hood lifted the latch, and the door opened. The wolf hid under the bed covers and said, "Put the cookies and a jar of jelly on the table and come sit on the bed beside me." Little Red Riding Hood climbed onto the bed and stared at her grandmother. "Grandma, what big arms you have," she cried. "All the better to hug you with," the wolf replied. "And Grandma, what big ears you have," "All the better to hear you with." "Grandma, what big eyes you have," "All the better to see you with, my child." "Grandma, what big teeth you have," cried Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to eat you with," barked the wolf, and throwing back the covers, he leaped out of the bed. Just as he was about to eat up the little girl, the woodcutter, who had been in the forest, burst into the cottage. With one blow of his axe, he cut off the wolf's head, and nobody was ever troubled by that wicked creature again. That was one story. Would you like to hear another? You would? Okay. Let me have a look if I can find another one, okay? Of course I can, because it's a very big book. Let me have a look. Which one I can read to you? This story is called Puss in Boots. Once there was a miller who, when he died, had nothing to leave his children but his mill, his donkey, and his cat. The property was soon divided without involving a lawyer or judge, since their fees would have taken the whole meager inheritance. The eldest son had the mill. The second son had the donkey, and the youngest had only the cat. The third son was not happy with such a small inheritance. "My brothers can earn an honest living by working together," he said. "But as for me, once I have eaten the cat and made myself a scar out of his skin, what shall I do?" The cat overheard his speech and drew himself up in a dignified manner. "Don't worry, my master. You only need to give me a drawstring bag and have a pair of boots made for me so that I can go through thick undergrowth, and you will see that you are not half as badly off as you thought." Although the cat's master did not have much confidence in his promise, he decided he would try anything to escape being poor. And after all, he had seen his cat perform cunning tricks in order to catch rats and mice. When the cat was given what he had asked for, he put on the boots. Then he put some grain and lettuce in a bag, slung the bag over his shoulder, and set off for a den where he knew there was a large number of rabbits. There he stretched out on the ground and as if he were dead, and then waited for some young, innocent rabbit to go into his bag to eat the bait. He had no sooner lain down when his plan worked. A young rabbit was tempted into the bag, where the clever cat trapped it by immediately pulling the drawstrings. Very proud of his catch, he went to the palace to seek an audience with the king. He was taken to his majesty's room, where he bowed deeply and said, "Majesty, here is a wild rabbit I am commanded to present to you in the name of Marcus the Carabas." This was the name he had made up for his master. "Tell your master that I'm very pleased and that I thank him," replied the king. A few days later, the cat hid in a wheat field and set his trap again. When 2 partridges wandered into the bag, he pulled the strings and caught them both. Then he went to the king, as he had done with the wild rabbit, and the king accepted the 2 partridges, which created with great pleasure, and gave the cat something to drink. The cat continued in this way for 2 or 3 months, visiting the king from time to time to take him game, supposedly from his master's hunting. One day he heard that the king was going for a drive along the riverbank with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world. The cat said to his master, "If you would follow my advice, your fortune is made. You only have to bathe in the river at the place I will show you, and then let me do the rest." The young man did what his cat advised him, although he wondered what good it would do for him. While he was bathing, the king passed by, and the cat started to shout at the top of his voice, "Help! Help! My master, the Marquis de Carabas, is drowning here." When the king heard this cry, he put his head out of the carriage window and recognized the cat who had brought him game so many times. He ordered his guards to rescue the Marquis. While the poor young man was being pulled out of the river, the cat approached the carriage and told the king that some wicked thieves have stolen his master's clothes. The cat had, in fact, hidden them under a big stone. The king immediately ordered his master of the wardrobe to pick out one of his most beautiful suits for the Marquis de Carabas. The king paid the young man a lot of attention, and the beautiful clothes that were given to him emphasized his handsome face and figure. The king's daughter admired him a great deal. Indeed, it wasn't long before she was completely in love with him. The king invited the Marquis to get into the carriage to join them for the rest of the trip. The cat was delighted to see that his plan had started to work, but there was still a great deal to do. He ran on ahead and soon came across some farmers cutting hay in a meadow. "Listen, farmers," he said. "If you do not tell the king that the field you are working in belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you will all be chopped up as fine as meat for hamburgers." Sure enough, when the king arrived, he asked the farmers whose field they were working on. "It belongs to the Marquis of Carabas," they all replied. "You have a considerable inheritance there," said the king to the Marquis de Carabas. "As you see, Majesty, it is a meadow which provides for an abundant crop every single year," answered the young man, although he had been truly astonished by their words. The ingenious cat still walked ahead, next encountered some harvesters and told them, "Listen, harvesters, if you do not say that all this wheat belongs to the Marquis de Carabas, you will be ground up as fine as meat for hamburgers." The king, who passed by a moment later, asked to whom all the wheat belonged. "It belongs to the Marquis of Carabas," answered the harvesters, and the king was even more delighted with the young man. The cat, who walked well ahead of the carriage, kept on saying the same thing to everyone he encountered, and the king was astonished to see the immense wealth of Marquis de Carabas. Finally, the artful cat arrived at the beautiful castle belonging to an orc. Indeed, all the land the king has been driving through was part of the estate of this castle. The cat knew this and asked to speak to the orc. The orc received him as courteously as an orc can and asked him to sit down. "I have been informed," said the cat, "that you possess the gift of being able to change yourself into all sorts of animals, that you could transform yourself, for example, into a lion or an elephant." "That is true," answered the orc. "And just to show you, I will change into a lion." The cat was so terrified to see a lion before him that he jumped for the nearest rafter to reach safety of the roof, but the boots he was wearing made it difficult and dangerous. When the orc had changed back again, he came down and licked his ruffled fur. "I have also been informed," continued the cat, "that you also have the power to take the form of smaller animals. For example, that you can change yourself into a rat or a mouse. I find this almost impossible to believe." "Impossible? Wait and see," exclaimed the orc. At once he changed himself into a mouse and started running across the floor. The cat no sooner saw the mouse than he pounced, caught, and ate it. In the meantime, the king had arrived at the orc's castle and wanted to call on the owner. Hearing the sound of the carriage rumbling across the drawbridge, the cat ran towards it and said to the king, "Your Majesty, welcome to the castle of the Marquis de Carabas." "What, Monsieur le Marquis?" cried the king. "The castle also belongs to you? I have never seen anything more beautiful than this courtyard and all the buildings around it. Let us see inside, please." The young man gave the princess his hand and followed the king into a larger room where a magnificent meal was laid out. The orc had had this meal prepared for his friends, who should have been visiting him that day, but who had not dared to approach the castle, knowing the king was there. Both the king and his daughter were quite charmed by the excellent qualities of the Marquis de Carabas. Having also seen all the wealth the Marquis possessed, the king at least said to him, "I see no reason why, if you agree, you should not be my son-in-law, Monsieur le Marquis." The Marquis, bowing low, accepted the honor the king did him, and that very day he married the princess. The clever cat was given the title Great Lord and never again ran after mice, except for fun. Are you sleepy already? You look sleepy. Yeah. Yes, I look sleepy too. I always get relaxed by reading you stories. Yeah. Let me see. I have another story for you. Would you like to hear it? Yeah? Okay. It's called The Princess and the Pea. Once upon a time there was a prince who wanted to marry a princess, but she had to be a real princess. So he traveled around the world to find one. There were a great many princesses, but he was never sure whether they truly were real princesses. There was always something not quite right about them. At last, he returned home very unhappy because he could not find what he was looking for. One evening there was a terrible storm with thunder and lightning and rain pouring down in torrents. It was dreadful. Suddenly there was a loud knocking at the castle door, and the king hurried to open it. There on the doorstep was a princess, but what a sight! She was drenched. Water ran down from her hair and her clothes. It ran down into the tops of her shoes and out of the toes. Nevertheless, she insisted that she was a real princess. "We will soon find out," thought the queen, eyeing the bedraggled girl. However, she said nothing and went to prepare a bedroom for the unexpected guest. She tripped all the bedding off and placed a pea on the base of the bed. Then she took 20 mattresses and laid them on the pea, after which she then laid 20 eider-down kilts on top of that. Then the queen showed the princess where she had to spend the night, and the girl climbed in thankfully. The next morning, the king and queen asked her how she slept. "Oh, terribly bad," she said. "I hardly shut my eyes the whole night." Goodness knows what was in that bed. It was something very hard, and now I'm black and blue all over. By this answer, the queen knew she was real. Only a princess would be sensitive enough to fill a pea through 20 mattresses and 20 eider-down quilts. The prince at long last had found his real princess, whom he married, and then the pea was placed in the museum where it can still be seen today, if it has not been stolen. Would you like to hear one more story? Yeah? Okay. I have one more story for you. It's a pretty long one, and I hope that you'll like it. I hope that it will make you sleepy. Okay. Snow White and the Rose Red. Once upon a time, a poor widow lived in a hut in a lonely place. In front of the hut was a garden in which grew 2 rose bushes, one with white roses and the other one with red. The widow had 2 daughters just like the 2 rose bushes, and they were called Snow White and Rose Red. The girls were very kind and obedient, and everyone who met them thought they must be the nicest girls in the world. Rose Red loved to run through fields and meadows, picking flowers and chasing butterflies, but Snow White preferred to stay with her mother at home, helping her with the housework and reading to her when the work was finished. The sisters loved each other so much that they always held hands when they left the house and vowed that they would never be parted as long as they lived. They often walked in the forest picking fruits, and the animals never hurt them, They trusted the girls so much that they would walk up to them. The hare ate clover from their hands. The deer grazed beside them. The elk danced around them, and the birds perched on the branches above them, singing beautiful songs to the girls. If they stayed late in the forest and it became too dark to find their way home, they would sleep side by side in the moss until the next morning. The mother knew they were safe there and never worried about them. One time, they had spent the night in the forest, and they woke up at dawn and saw a beautiful child in a bright white dress standing in front of them. She looked at them kindly but said nothing, and then she disappeared into the forest. When the girls looked around, they discovered that they had been sleeping at the very edge of a cliff. They would certainly have fallen if they had walked just 2 more steps in the darkness. Their mother was sure that the child must have been the guardian angel of good children. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's hut so clean that it was always a pleasure to look at. In the summer, Rose Red did the housework every morning before her mother awoke, and then she would place a bunch of flowers beside her bed in which there was 1 rose from each bush. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the pot hanger. The big copper kettle glittered like gold in the firelight because she had polished it so well. In the evening, when the snow fell, their mother would say, "Snow White, bolt the door, please." Then they sat by the fireside. Their mother put her glasses on and read to the children from a big book, and the 2 young girls spun wool while they're listening. Their pet lamb slept at their feet, and behind them, on its perch, slept the white turtle dove with his head tucked under its wing. One night, when they were all sitting peacefully together, there was a knock on the door. "Rose Red, open the door quickly," said her mother. "It might be a traveler who's looking for a shelter." Rose Red pulled back the bolt, expecting to see a poor man, but to her great surprise, a bear put his big head through the doorway. Rose Red screamed and jumped back. The lamb began blatting, the turtle dove started fluttering about, and Snow White hid behind her mother's chair. Then the bear began to speak. "Don't be afraid. I won't do any harm. I'm half frozen and I only want to warm myself a little." "Poor bear," said the mother. "Lie down near the fire, but be careful not to burn your fur." Then she said, "Snow White, Rose Red, come here, my children. The bear will not hurt you." So they both came closer. Little by little, the lamb and the turtle dove also approached and were not afraid of him any longer. Then the bear said, "My children, would you mind brushing the snow off my fur?" So they went to get a broom and cleaned the bear's fur. Then he stretched out by the fire, rumbling gently with comfort and pleasure. The girls soon felt so sure of the bear that they began to tease their large guest. They pulled his fur with their hands, put their little feet on his back, rolled him from side to side, patted him with a stick, and burst out laughing when he was growled. The bear let them play, but if it became too rough, he said, "Children, leave me in peace. Snow White, Rose Red. Don't kill your sweetheart. When it was bedtime and the girls were asleep, their mother said to the bear, "You stay the night there, near the fire, and God will watch over you." The next morning, the two girls let the bear go when he asked, and he went back into the forest, shoveling through the snow. From then on, he came back every evening and at the same time to lie near the fire, and he let the girls play with him. They were so used to him by now that they did not bolt the door anymore until after their friend came in. When spring arrived and everything outside was green again, the bear said to Snow White one morning, "Now I have to leave you. You will not see me in the summer. Where are you going, dear bear?" "Dear bear," asked Snow White, "I have to go into the forest to protect all my treasures from the bad gnomes," he replied. "In the winter, when the land is completely frozen, the treasure is safe, for they have to stay under the ground. Now the sun has warmed the ground. They can make holes and get out. Everything they lay their hands on is taken back to their caves and never seen again." Snow White opened the door for him, but she was very sad because he had to leave. However, as the bear left, a little piece of his fur stuck in the latch. It seemed to Snow White that she saw gold glittering through the fur, but she was not absolutely sure. The bear left quickly, and soon he had disappeared behind the trees. Sometime later, the mother sent her children into the woods to gather twigs. On their way, they found a huge tree lying on the ground, and around the trunk they saw something jumping about between the leaves, but they could not make out what it was. When they came closer, they saw it was a gnome. He had an old, wrinkled face and a long, white beard. The end of his beard was caught in a crack of the tree, and the little man was leaping from one side to the other like a chained dog, not knowing how to get out of this tangle. He started at the two young girls with his flaming eyes and cried, "What are you standing there for? Can't you come and help me?" "Little man, what are you doing there?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid nosy goose," answered the gnome. "I wanted to chop down this tree to get some small logs for the kitchen. The big logs burn our plates and we used to eat from, since we are not as greedy as you. I drove the wedge in with my axe, but the wedge was too shiny. It flew straight out and the crack closed so quickly that I had no time to pull out my beautiful white beard, and now I'm stuck. Don't laugh at me, you naughty girls. Oh, you are very unkind." The children tried with all their might to pull the beard out of the tree, but it was impossible. It was completely stuck. "I will go and find someone else to help us," said Rose Red. "You stupid lamb," grumbled the gnome. "What good would that do? There are already two of you here, and that is far too many. Can't you think of anything better?" "Be patient," exclaimed Rose Red. "We will find a solution." She took a pair of scissors from her pocket and cut the beard where it was caught. As soon as the gnome was free, he snatched up a bag filled with gold that was hidden between the roots of the tree. He hugged it tightly and moaned, "Oh, what a horrible scissors that dare to cut the end of my fine beard. I hope the devil will get to you, you wicked girls." Then he swung the bag on his back and was off without even thanking the children. Another day, later in the summer, Snow White and Rose Red decided to go fishing. When they arrived at the bank of the stream, they saw what they thought was a grasshopper jumping at the side of the water. They ran towards it and recognized the gnome. "What are you doing?" asked Rose Red. "Do you want to jump into the water?" "I am not stupid," answered the gnome. "Can't you see that fish trying to drag me into the water? Oh, it's an enchanted fish and I cannot break free of it." The little man told the girls that he had sat down with a rod and line, but a breeze had blown up and entangled the line in his beard just when the big fish was biting it. He wasn't able to pull it back since the fish was much stronger. The gnome tried to grab the blades of grass and rushes, but all in vain, and now he was in danger of being pulled into the water. The two girls arrived just in time. They pulled at the line and tried to release the beard, but they had no more luck than the gnome. The beard and the cord were quite entangled in each other. At last, the one thing they could think of to do was to take the scissors and cut the beard, which made it much shorter. When the gnome saw that they cut his beard, he started to cry. "Do you have to be so stupid? Wasn't it enough to cut the end of my beard? Now you have taken the best part away from me, and I'm so embarrassed to go back to my friends. I hope you will get the punishment you deserve." Then the ungrateful gnome picked up a bag filled with pearls that was hidden in the reeds, and without saying another word, he disappeared behind a stone. A few days later, their mother sent the two young girls into town to buy some thread, needles, braid, and ribbon. The path led across a field scattered with big rocks. On their way, they saw an eagle hovering overhead. Suddenly, as they watched, it swooped down behind a rock. Just as they were wondering what the big bird had spotted there, they heard a loud and piercing squeak. The girls ran towards the noise and saw that the eagle had grabbed their old friend, the gnome, and was trying to fly away with him. The children quickly caught hold on to the gnome's jacket and held on tight. The eagle flapped. The gnome howled and the children struggled and pulled. Eventually, the effort became too much for the eagle, who had to give up and let go of its prey. When the gnome had recovered from the shock, he screamed with all his might, "Couldn't you have handled me a little bit more carefully? You have pulled so hard on my little jacket that it's torn to shreds, you horrible, clumsy girls." Then he picked up a bag filled with precious stones and slipped under the rock into his cave. The young girls were used to his ungratefulness by now. They carried on towards the town to do their shopping, thinking no more about the horrid little man. However, on their way back across the fields, they again met the gnome. He was gloating over his hoard of precious stones, and he had not expected anyone to pass by at that time of the evening. The sunset made the stones sparkle, and the sight was so beautiful that the girls stopped to look. "What are you staring at with your monkey face?" snapped the gnome when he saw them. His pale face became as red as fire, and he began to shout more insults at them in the hope that they would decide to go away. All of a sudden there was a terrible roar, and a black bear came running from the woods. The terrified gnome tried to hide, but the bear was too fast for him and quickly caught him with his huge paws. Then he started squealing and howling. "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me. I will give you all my treasures." Look at the beautiful stones I have here. Don't kill me. What would you do with such a poor little man like me? You wouldn't even feel me between your teeth. Why don't you take those 2 wretched girls instead? They would make a delicious snack for you. They are as plump as a pair of geese. For goodness sake, eat them instead of me." The bear did not take any notice of what the gnome said and gave him one kick which killed him instantly. Then the bear called out to the 2 frightened girls who were running away as fast as they could, "Snow White, Rose Red, don't be afraid. Wait for me, I will go with you." Suddenly the girls recognized his voice and stopped running in delight. But when the creature came closer to them, his bearskin suddenly fell off, and in front of them instead stood a young man dressed all in gold. "I am a prince," he said. "I was bewitched by the evil gnome who stole all my treasures. He made me run through the woods in the form of a wild bear and said I would not be free of the spell until he's dead. Now he has received the punishment he deserved." Now you might think that that was the end of the story, but it wasn't quite. A few years later, Snow White married the prince and Rose Red married his brother. The old mother lived with her children in peace and happiness ever after. She brought the rose bushes to the palace and planted them under the window, and every year they still bloomed with the most beautiful white and red roses in the world. Okay, honey, that was the last story that I had for you. Are you going to sleep now? Do you think you can sleep? Yeah? Okay, sweetheart. I hope that you'll sleep well, and I'll see you tomorrow, okay?